welcome to the compositing portion of the rocketship project. In this segment, we're going to take all of the render passes that we've created, we're going to put them together and see if we can make a nice looking image out of it. To begin with, let's just take a quick look at the Nuke interface. It's very straightforward. It's actually incredibly simple. We have basically split into four main areas. On the left hand, we have all our tools. This is where we add the various nodes that we're going to need to do our compositing. Nuke is, of course, a node-based workflow. Here at the top, we have the viewing window. So this is, we're going to see whatever we plug into our viewer node down here. Underneath here is our work area where we wire all our nodes together. We also have access to a curve editor here in Adobe Sheet. You probably spend most of your time in the node graph though. And then over on the right hand side here, we have properties. And what properties is blank right now. It's going to pop up whatever the currently selected node is that you have. For example, if I go over here, click on, you can see this little arrow in front of a file in node. So we can bring a node in by using a read node. And I can select render pass, for example. And this is one of the render passes that we did. And click open. And now that is the read node, and it has the file for the smoke shadow. And we can see, because it's the currently selected node, that its information is over here on the right hand side. Now if I select another node, it'll pop up above this one, pushing this one down. So let me find another node. Let's just throw in a shuffle node for now. And you see that the shuffle node is now on top and the previous node is just below it. So these things continually stack up and stack up, and if there's too many there, you can just remove them. And removing them doesn't remove the data, it just removes them from this properties pane over here. You can get it back simply by double clicking it again, or double clicking this again, and they'll always appear from the top down in order. So as I just showed you, we can just clear that out. We can load files by applying a read node and then surfing to here's our directory with all of our renders in. We can go to the Rocket directory and import that. So that automatically puts it in, and we just connect it to our viewer to take a look at it. We'll press the play button and it'll cache in there, and once it's all cached, it'll play nice and smoothly. And this is basically how the compositing works. Whatever the last thing in your compositing flow you want to see, you plug it into the viewer, and this is viewer number 1, so you can actually select any node, and if you hit the 1 button, it'll automatically view. Let me just show you that. I'm going to stop this for a second, and I'll bring in another render pass. Let's take the Rocket RGB mats. That's nice and visible. Now simply by clicking on this, if I just type 1, that automatically connects it to the viewer, and that's the one we're viewing. If I want to view this one, I type 1. You can have another viewer in, see the little number 1, that would be viewer 2. So you basically quickly connect the currently selected node to a viewer simply by typing the number of the viewer. Viewer 1, there we go. Now I have a bunch of render passes to import into here, plus a plate, and I could add a read node for each single one and surf for it, but there's a way easier way. Here, let me just multi-select these and delete them. There's a far easier way, and here's how it is. Here's the directory with all of the render passes in it, so I can just multi-select them and drag them right into the node graph, and there they are. They automatically come in as read nodes. Now I can just spread them out a little bit more reasonably. And I'm just using my mouse to move this around. A lot of compositors will use a tablet, and I have a tablet here. I might switch to that later. But for now I'm just using the mouse. And navigating your way around the node graph is really simple. It's the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, left mouse button to select things, and middlemost button, click and drag to move things around. And you can see you have a little navigation window down here as well. So let's just spread these out a little bit so we can take a look at them. All of our various render passes. So I can look at any one of these simply by clicking on it and typing 1. So all our various render passes. And we probably made one or two more than we actually need in the end. So we'll just work our way through this and see how well it goes. There's one more image sequence that I'm missing before I can start my composite, and that is the background plate. So I will find that. That exists in my video footage directory here in the rocketship plate directory. And once again, I'll look inside that and we can see that it's image sequence. So I can actually just drag the directory, the whole directory in, and it'll come in as an image sequence. And there it is. So now that I have my basic elements into my scene, the first thing I want to do is I just want to get a little bit of real estate here. Make a little space in my node graph. And I like to organize things a little bit. So first of all, I'm going to put my plate up here. I like to put all my various shadows and mattes together. And I want to put my RGB render together with the plate. So basically we have an RGB render. It's going over the plate. Let's see, we also have a smoke render here somewhere. Rocketship smoke. And then almost everything else is matte. Matte, shadow pass. So for the moment, let's put mattes down here. And we'll put shadows up here. There's another smoke one. Another matte. And a couple of more shadows. So our comp elements are split into RGB renders over on the left side, shadows along the top, and mattes along the bottom. So before we get to comping, we want to weed through these and make sure we only have the passes we need. This shadow pass down here looks kind of suspicious to me, so let's just take a look at it and see what it is looking like. So yeah, that doesn't look like much of a smoke pass to me. And furthermore, it doesn't actually animate. It looks like it's only a single frame. So we don't actually need that image sequence. So we'll just delete that right away. We'll take a look at our plate. And our plate is looking pretty good. Take a look at our RGB element. And that looks roughly right. And let's take a look at our smoke element and see how it's looking. And of course, we won't see the smoke until later on. Okay, yeah, so our smoke is happening. So our 3 RGB elements are there and are working. Let's now take a look at our shadow elements here. First we have a rocket shadow. Looks like we have 2 rocket shadows here. So let's sort out which is the correct rocket shadow. Play this one through. That one looks not too bad. Looks like it works right. Let's look at the other one now. Okay, so the second rocket shadow is the one with the rocket and the smoke together in them. And you may recall that we made a choice to separate the rocket from the smoke so that we could soften up the smoke a little bit. Its shadow's looking kind of harsh and fake in CG. So we're definitely not going to use this pass. We'll just delete it right now. Just the delete key, we'll just delete that right away. Here's now our smoke shadow. So now we have a rocket and our smoke separated out. And that's good. That's the way we want it. And here's one that says a rocketship shadow 1. And I think this is the one where we made mistakes and left the ground plane on and did a bunch of other things wrong. So I'll just play through that and double check. Yeah, that's definitely not the right shadow pass that we're looking for. So once again, we'll simply, and only partially rendered as well, so we'll delete that. And it's nice, we're starting to get it a lot tidier no graph window already. We definitely don't want any more mess in here than we need to. It's going to get complicated enough. And here's the last shadow one called ambient shadow, so we'll hook that up. We'll take a look and see what it's looking like. So yeah, so you can see it's just a very soft shadow underneath the rocket from ambient room light. And it looks right, and it should just kind of drop off and disappear as the rocket takes off. So let's push on a little further. And yeah, we can see right here where the rocket takes off that those shadows disappear. So that shadow pass is working really nicely as well. All right, I'll just stop that. Now we'll take a look at our matte passes. So we have our, remember our RGB matte pass that we created for our 3 hull colors. And that looks right. That was also render checked. So all of these have been render checked. This is the wing light matte. So we can see that the little tip lights start flashing in this render pass, and that's what we want. We want to be able to add nice little glows when those lights flick on. So this is the animated wingtip matte pass, so that works nicely. And then we also have this another one, rocketship lights matte pass, and this is the unanimated pass. So this has the antenna light and the tip lights, and they're on constantly, and this will allow us to localize those areas if we want to, for example, make a color change. So these ones are not animated. And then of course we also have a matte pass for the animated antenna matte as well. Let's take a look at that. Again, I just type 1 to connect it to the viewer, and you can see that that's working as well. You may recall when we were lighting this that the antenna starts blinking and blinks faster and faster and faster until takeoff. So right here in the middle we have our 2 animated matte passes. I'm going to stick this one over with the RGB one and keep these 2 animated ones together so that we know those are the animated ones. So naturally the first thing you want to do once you get yourself organized and sorted out is you want to save. So I simply went save as. I created a new directory inside my project directory. I simply called it nuke, and inside nuke I'll create a new nuke script, and I'm going to call it rocketship comp 01.nk, and nk is the file extension for nuke script, and hit save. So now we're ready to get rolling. This is the current set of nodes that we have ready to go. I want to kind of set the shadows and mattes aside for now, and I would like to just focus on comping our RGB and our smoke over the top of our plate. So this is very simple. You may be familiar with Photoshop layers and merging, or you may have used some other software where you use merges. It's very simple. So we can add a merge node to our scene a number of different ways. We can go over here to our tools and we can grab a merge node out of here. That's one way to do it. Another way is we can type tab and start typing merge, M-E-R, and this is a great way to find nodes, and you can grab merge from there. You can find all of the nodes simply by typing tab and starting to type in. That's another way to get a merge node. But merge is very commonly used, so most commonly you'll simply type M and you get a merge node that way. So what we want to do is we want to put our RGB rocket ship here over top of the plate. So we'll actually grab the A, stick it on the rocket, and we'll grab the B, stick it on the plate, and then with this selected, we'll type 1 to connect it to the viewer, and now we have a simple A over B comp. And if we play that, we'll see there's our CG tracking along with our plate right over top. And it works quite nicely. So this is your absolute basic A over B type of comp with no additional adjustment done. But this is how to do it with a simple merge node. And if you look over at the merge node, you can see there's lots of options here. And over is the option you're most likely going to be changing when you're trying to use different types of merges. And this is where you start thinking about the way that Photoshop layers merge, because these operations, you'll recognize a lot of these names. Divide and difference and max, minimum, and so forth. And it's really fun to actually just try out these various different merge operations and see what each of them do. And of course, as you can see, you get mouse over help as well. So if you just hover over the operation name, you get a nice help description of what it does. So in this way, Nuke is actually incredibly easy to learn just by sitting down. If you have any concept of how a node workflow works, you just sit down, kind of start fooling around with it, and pretty soon you're compositing it. It's not very complex at all. So our image has all our images have buffered now, so we can see the full render of both the plate and the rocket ship as it takes off. So, two separate image sequences come together with the merge node. Now let's see if we can get the smoke added in there as well. Now the question is, here's our smoke here, and the question is, where do we want it? What do we want it on top of, and what do we want it beneath? And the answer is that we want the smoke to be over top of both the rocket and the plate. Remember from our renders, the smoke actually sits in front of and behind the rocket, but if we take a close look at our smoke, just our smoke render here, where's that smoke? There it is. We'll see that the smoke is cut out where the rocket ship is. Remember, we added the holdout mat of the black rocket ship in there, so the smoke will properly be integrated with the 3D geometry in three-dimensional space. That's the purpose of the holdout mat. So in order to get our smoke to be on top, we need another merge. So I'll just type M to add another merge node. And because I had the smoke already selected, it's already automatically input into the A input of the merge. We want this other merge to become the B, so it's A over B, remember, and we can drag this one down, but it's actually often a better idea to grab from the merge node and drag up to make sure you're getting the right one. And there we have it. Now our smoke is merged over top of our rocket and our plate. And let me just actually reorganize this so it's a little bit easier to see. If we put our plate on the top and a merge node here with the rocket coming into it and another merge node below it with the smoke coming into it, it kind of becomes visually obvious that we're moving down and adding things on top as we go and coming out of the viewer at the bottom. You know, there's lots of different arguments about ways to organize your flow so that it's visually understandable. This is a way that I works for me. You may prefer to have the top layers at the top and the bottom layers at the bottom, and that's fine. Whatever works best for you. So we'll just play through this and we can see that those elements are properly integrated together. What we see that's really missing is that there's no shadow being cast onto the table plane here. So I'm looking at this image and I'm seeing, yeah, the CG looks roughly in the right color space. I don't think it's actually quite brightly illuminated enough. And the smoke definitely needs some love, but the number one thing here right now is that there's no shadow being cast onto this ground plane, this table here. So to begin with, let's start integrating that shadow onto our table here. Alright, so let's add the rocket ship shadow first. We'll deal with the smoke second. You may recall we kind of pushed them over to the side here. I think this is it. Let's just take a quick look there. Rocket shadow, yep, that's the one. Now, you may recall the way we rendered this. Let's just look at this. So we can look at what is in the RGB and channel, R, G, and B channels simply by typing R, G, and B, or you can select it up here too. You can select the red channel, the green channel, the blue channel, and since this is just a black and white image, we created this deliberately. All three channels look the same. If we look in the alpha channel, we can see there's nothing there. Now we want to use this image as an alpha channel, as a matte, to cast a shadow onto our background plate, onto the table there. So there's a couple of things we need to do. First of all, we need to take some of this information. We need to stick it in the alpha channel. So we need to make this behave like an alpha. Furthermore, we have black where we want the shadow to be and white everywhere else, and that's the opposite of what we need. So we need to invert this image as well. And then thirdly, we need to be able to control how much shadow is underneath the rocket. We don't just want it to be pitch black. So to begin with, let's look at what we need to do to get this either the R, the G, or the B channel into the alpha channel. It's pretty simple. There's a node that's made especially for that, and it is called a shuffle node. And it's easy to get. Once again, just type tab SH and you get shuffle. And we're going to plug our rocket shadow into the shuffle node. Now, if we look up here on the right, we can see this is the interface for the shuffle node. And it looks kind of confusing, but it looks a lot more confusing than it is, because there's settings in here for when this tool is used in a different way. For example, when it's used as a shuffle copy node. In this case, it's as simple as this. You see here RGBA. These are the current channel input channels. And over here, red, green, blue, alpha, these are the output channels. You could actually just delete this set of squares, this set of squares, and this set of squares, and it would be input, output, and it would be a lot simpler to look at. But this is more multifunctional than that, so this is the way it's laid out. So we think of right now the red channel is giving its information to the red channel, the green channel is giving its information to the green channel, the blue channel is giving its information to the blue channel, and the alpha channel is giving its information to the alpha channel. Where currently there's nothing in the alpha channel, so we want to put one of the R, G, or B channels in the alpha channel. This is how easy it is. I'm going to put the red channel into the alpha channel. There. Now the red channel is outputting to the alpha channel. So if I connect my viewer to this shuffle node now, and I looked into the alpha channel, now I can see that information is in the alpha channel, as well as the red, green, and blue channel. So the shuffle node allowed me to basically shuffle that information from the red channel over into the alpha channel output over here. Now another thing, as we said, the image needs to be inverted. Once again, simply type tab I to get the I ones. You just pull invert right out of it, and we'll push invert onto the shuffle node. And then we'll make the invert node viewable by selecting it and typing 1. There. Very simply, we've inverted it. Now, this is what we need it to be. It's in the alpha channel, and it's inverted. It's white where we want to perform our action, and black where we don't want to do anything. Now we need to use this information, this alpha channel, to color grade our background plate down to sort of bring the diffuse value down so that it's darker and looks like a cast shadow. So the node that we need is simply called a grade node. So once again, tab, type G, R, there's the grade node right there. And we now need to stop for a moment and say, okay, where exactly in the flow, the current flow, do we want this to happen? Well, we want it to happen on top of the plate, but not on top of the rocket ship or the smoke, so it needs to go in between here. So we'll take our grade node, just hover it over in between, it will automatically connect in between. And then this becomes our mask for the grade. And if you can see this little funny arrow on the side is different from the other ones, that means that's where you connect your masks. So I'm just going to drag that over and connect it onto the invert node here. Let me just reorganize this a little bit. And now I'm going to go down to the bottom of my flow and hook that up to my viewer. And of course I'm viewing alpha right now, so I want to view RGB. So there I am. So this is all connected up, but I haven't done any grading yet. So let's look at the interface of the grading node. So here it is. The simplest way to make a grading change is simply to drop the gain down a little bit. So watch what happens here under the rocket ship as I pull the gain down. See how the shadow appears? All that does is drop the gain of the area of the mask. I can also color the shadow simply by clicking on the color swatch here, and I can use the color wheel and make myself a nice colored shadow. So I can make myself a nice bright red shadow, you see. So you can see there's a lot of options. I can carefully and precisely match the correct color of the shadow. Let's just see if I can come up with something reasonably good here. Obviously red is not right. Looks like it is a little bit kind of reddy amber though. But we're going to get into the details of refining the shadow color a little bit later. For now I'm just going to use a value to roughly dial it into about the right shadow density. For example, that's too bright, that's too dark, so I know it's somewhere in the middle. And I'm just kind of looking at the shadow of this cup here. And I'm actually going to hit the space bar, and what that'll do is that'll maximize my window. I'm going to zoom in and just do a little visual comparison here. That's not too far off. I'm still a little bit bright. I'd say something like that is in the ballpark. Obviously I'm going to need to soften the edge of this shadow a little bit, but for now that's roughly in the ballpark. Mine's a little bit too cool. It's not quite as warm as this, but we'll deal with sorting out those fine details later. Right now we're just trying to assemble our comp, get things together and working, and then we'll go back and start dealing with the finer details. Now I'll hit the space bar again to get out of my maximized viewing pane, and I'll close my color wheel. So let's just take a quick look at our flow here and review. So we have our plate. The first thing we have is our plate. The plate is being graded by this shadow mask. The plate with its shadow on it is now being merged and having the rocket ship put over top of that. And then if we go down, follow the flow down, then the smoke is being put on top of that, and that's what's being viewed. So if we want to take a look at this playing, here's what it looks like. I'll just play that ahead. So that's working not too bad to begin with. Obviously what's missing now is the shadow from our smoke. So let's go ahead and add that. I'll just stop this from playing. Push my pane up a little bit. And the next thing we want to do is find the correct smoke shadow. There it is. There's the smoke shadow. Actually, I don't think that's right. I think we need to add the ambient shadow in as well underneath the rocket ship. Now the ambient shadow and the rocket ship shadow do not need to go through the whole shuffle and invert thing. We can actually just merge these two together and then run them into the shuffle. So I'm going to add a merge. And of course, you can also just add a merge. Let me delete this one just by typing M. And I want to merge both the rocket ship shadow and the ambient shadow together. Now, if you remember the ambient shadow, let's just take a look at that one. It's pretty subtle. These really dark areas are right under the feet, so they're not going to be that noticeable. But just this soft shadow from the room around is going to add a bit of realism to the shadow type. So let's stick both of these shadows together into the merge and take a look at the merge. And it's not really working right. The operation is over. So what we want to do is switch the operation to minimum. And what that does is it includes both the minimum values of the ambient shadow and the minimum values of the rocket ship shadow. So they're both in there together. You can see those nice little soft detail of shadow in there. So this merge is now what's going to go into the shuffle. So just disconnect that, and I'll drag the shuffle node onto the merge. And now when we look at our final output, you can just barely see the nice little softness of shadow around those feet, and that'll add a nice little bit of realistic detail. So now we'll do the same approach for adding in the smoke shadow. Once again, we're going to add another merge node. We're actually going to lift these 3 nodes up to give us a little bit of space. And we're going to merge this node with our smoke shadow. And once again, we're going to switch the operation to minimum. And this shuffle is going to go into this merge node. So you can see how we've added those 3 shadows together. We won't see the smoke shadow obviously until later on when there is some smoke. So let's find a spot here. Alright, and if we look at that, we can see that our smoke shadow is now properly integrating with the other shadow, but if we look at it, it's a little bit too sharp. So what we'd like to do is blur just this shadow before it goes into the merge. So if you're working in Nuke for the first time and you're wondering how to do that, well, you've already seen that you can search through here to find various types of nodes, but the really easy way to find one, for example, if we said we want to blur this, is there must be a blur function. So let's just type the tab key and start typing blur and see if we can find one. BL, and there it is right at the top, blur. And once again, because we had the smoke shadow already selected, the blur automatically connects itself in between. So we can actually connect just this to the viewer, and this makes it a little quicker and easier and more interactive to work. And because we have the blur node selected, its interface comes right up at the top of the properties, and here it is. So we'll look at it. We can see channels. We have a choice of working in certain channels or all of them. We want to work in all the channels. And we have the size of the blur, so let's just slide that back and forth and see what happens. So obviously as we increase the size of the blur, the shadow gets blurrier. And we also have different filter types, so we can try different blur types. Let me just turn this up a little bit, and then we'll have a look. We have box, which is a little sharper, triangle, quadratic, and Gaussian. I kind of like the look of the box myself, and it's a little bit too blurry. I just want to take kind of the harsh CG edge off of that blur. And you know, I think I might want to do that with the rocket ship shadow as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's our rocket ship one. Just double check it. Yep, that's the rocket ship one. And I'm going to stick a blur in there. So with the rocket ship node selected, tab, and we have blur already. And we drop the blur in. I'm just going to increase its blur a little bit. Let's get a nice zoom in there so we can take a look at it. So that's 0. Just want to add a little bit of softness to that. And let's take a look at our final comp, and that's feeling a lot more like that. So that's feeling a little bit better. Okay, so let's take a look at our whole render so far and see how it's feeling. Alright, so this is what our render is looking like right now. It's looking pretty good. Shadow densities are feeling about right. And the smoke itself is feeling pretty kind of harsh and chunky and sharp. So I think we're going to need to blur that out for sure. Typically my process when I'm looking at an image and trying to figure out what I need to do next is I'll look at the image or the image sequence, try to pick the one thing that really bugs me the most, the thing that I think is the ugliest or needs the most work. And in this case, it's the quality of the smoke. So let's look at that hypervoxel smoke here. Here we go. So yeah, it's just too harsh and sharp edged. So let us go back to our comp, find our smoke element. Here it is. And let's add a blur to it as well. And find a frame with lots of smoke. That'll be up near towards the end here. There we go. So let's see if we can do this just by adding some blur. Well, it definitely helps a little bit. I think we might have to give a little bit more help later on. But that definitely gives a more wispy feel to the smoke. And that's feeling a lot better. Here's another approach we could use to improving the smoke a little bit, because blurring it out has softened up the edges all right, but it's also really taken all the detail out of the middle. So I'd like to suggest this approach. We can take our smoke element, run it through the blur, and we can also take it and not run it through the blur and put it over top. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to add another merge, and I'm going to put the original render, just grab the A here, I'm going to put the original render over top of the blurred render. So grab the B here, and I'm going to run that into the A of this other merge. And now, if we take a close look, so we have the smoke twice. We have it once on top of itself blurred. Now, if I go to the blur and I increase the blur here, you'll see that it's now just kind of around the edges and behind, and that we have this one over the top as well that isn't blurred. So we get wispiness around the edges, but we get to maintain the kind of the crisp detail inside. That's maybe too much of a blur. And that's Gaussian. Let's switch that to a box blur, tighten it up a little bit. So that should really help out a lot. So here's what our smoke is looking like now. You can see the nice wispy edges, but I still think, I'm actually still thinking that the top layer of smoke, which we blurred before, is now a little too sharp. So what we can do is we can add a little bit of blur to it as well. So I'll select, I'll just add a blur node. Just drop it right in between here. So for this blur node, we'll turn it up until we get just a little bit of softness, not too much. So I'm going with the size of about 2 pixels for the blur, and the other one has a blur of about 14.5 pixels. So we're getting those wispy edges. Actually, that might be a little bit too much. Let's turn that down a bit. Let's say around 10 pixels. And now when we run them together, it'll look like one layer, but it's feeling a lot less harsh than it was. Let's take a look. So yeah, that's definitely feeling quite a lot better. Obviously, we have still some color correct to do on the smoke. It's not really sitting in exactly the right lighting color. You can see the light in the scene is pretty amber, and the light on the smoke right now is pretty straight white. So we do need to still do a little bit of color correcting on that smoke. But that'll do it for now. So here's our composite so far. Let's just take a look over, see how everything's working. You see those little red flashy lights that are not really very visible. The animation of the antenna isn't really visible at all, but fortunately we have animated masks for those. We call them mats in CG, and we're going to use those to enhance the look of those lights. But before we get to that, I want to look at the 3-color RGB mat that we created and discuss how we can use it to color correct or grade only certain parts of the geometry if we wish to. Let me just stop this. I'm going to take a look at the whole node flow. Here's a really quick way to get the node graph wide open. Simply hover your mouse over it and type the space bar, and you'll see the whole node graph. Let's just pull these mats over, because we're going to start working with our mats. And specifically, I want to start looking at the 3-color RGB mat that we created. I'm going to type spacebar to go back to our viewer, and this is what it looks like. Now, the purpose behind creating a flat red, green, blue channel mat like this is simply that if we wanted to isolate these 3 areas of the body geometry, we could do it by creating 3 separate mats, each one a black and white mat. Or we can combine them all into a single render and then split them out into separate alpha channels using the shuffle node. So this is great in that it reduces the need for multiple renders. So you save disk file space. You only need 1/3 as many files on disk. You only need 1/3 as many scenes to render out, and 1/3 as many renders. So let's look at how we can split this out into distinct alpha channels. First, let's grab the node here and add a shuffle. So tab SH to find a shuffle. And we want to take just the red channel, and let's just look through the viewer of the shuffle node. We want to take the red channel and put it into the alpha channel. And then we want to go up here and switch the viewer to alpha, and we can either do it through the drop down, or we can simply type A. So this is what the red channel looks like. So shuffle 2 here is just this mask. We can add another shuffle node, also connect it to here, and for this shuffle node we're going to put the green channel into the alpha, and we'll view this one now. And we'll add yet another shuffle node, do the same thing, and with this shuffle node this time we'll put the blue channel into the alpha, and now we'll view this one. So we can see that what we've done is we've taken the red channel and shuffled it into the alpha in this one, taken the green and shuffled it into the alpha here, taken the blue and shuffled it into the alpha here. So now we have 3 distinct masks that we can use for color correcting that came from a single file. So now let's go up, take these nodes and go up to the body geo and see if we can do a little bit of color correct work on that body. So in order to color correct the body, before it goes into the merge node, we need to add a grade. So with this one selected, tab, GR, grade, and it'll go right in between there. Whichever color we want to grade, we want to connect to the correct shuffle. So let's start with the red body. which is this one here. So we'll take this shuffle and we'll plug it into the mask. Actually, let's go the other way. We'll grab the mask and plug it into that shuffle. And then let's look at the output of the grade in, of course, we want to be in RGB mode. And now going to the grade, we can change the gain, so we can make it brighter and darker. Or we can select a color. So you see we can actually, using the grade, we can completely change the color of the body geometry to anything that we wish. No problem. In this particular case though, all I want to do is color correct this, grade the body so that it matches up better with the background plate. So I'm going to go to my, look at the end of my flow, and look at the full thing here, and just undo that color correct. And you'll see that the environment is warmer and brighter than the rocket ship body. So there's a few different ways I can change the gain. I can move the slider back and forth, so I can bring it up and down. I can color pick directly from the image by clicking on here and then control clicking inside the image to find a color if one exists that seems appropriate. You can actually just spend time fooling around here looking for colors as well. Actually looking at the highlights and seeing if I can lift this just by using the highlight values within the image. It would be a lot easier if this background was an EXR image and I could have nice high values, but it isn't. It's a JPEG sequence. So that's not too likely to be successful. I'll try it out anyways. Also, I can click on the color wheel and actually try to manually find a color to grade. And I can switch it. If I have RGB colors and I just want to go back to my slider, I can just click off on the Vector 4 button. For now I'm going to lift it a little bit, and I think I would like to just warm it up slightly. So it's a little over here in the yellow greeny range, and I'm going to push it up into a little bit more of the yellow orangey range. And then of course I'm going to need to increase some saturation to affect that. Actually, I'll push this saturation way up. Totally in the wrong range there. There we go. And I just pushed the saturation way up just so that I can see what's happening, and then I'll bring it back down again. Definitely don't want to go too red there. I'll pull this down. It's still a little bit too greeny. There we go. And pull that down. And also, if we want to get into a little bit more complex method of correcting color, we can, instead of a grade node, we can use a color correct node. So once again, I'll go tab and we'll find the color correct. And I will delete this and plug the color correct in there instead. So we're going to be color correcting the rocket. And with this node, you can see there's control over the master control, which is over everything, and then over shadows, midtones, and highlights. So it gives us more precise control. So if we want to push our highlights up, for example, let's just fire up our gain. You need to connect that to the viewer. And we can see when we crank our gain up and down on our highlights that the ring, which is the white part of the image, which is going to be the brightest part, is being affected. And I don't think that's what we want to go for. That's too high. So we're trying to bring out kind of some of these reflections, which are not highlights yet. So let's try turning up the gain on the midtones and see what we get. So yeah, that's definitely the right area that we want to enhance, but it's a little bit too broad. So our goal is to try to bring out these highlights. A good approach to this is we want to increase the contrast, because right now the highlights are too close to the main body color. So we want to push that contrast up. And you can see what that does is it really oversaturates the color. So we want to reverse that by bringing the saturation down. And you can see as we increase the contrast and decrease the saturation, what we're doing is we're really starting to push those highlights out. And we're trying to match this kind of highlight, this bright highlight, these overexposures on these bananas. There's all these little exposures around the scene. We're trying to kind of match that. We've changed the color a little bit. It's a little bit cool. So let's just try to get those highlights right. So push the contrast up. Actually, pushing that contrast up brought a bunch of the color back in. That's feeling pretty good. Let me just bring that. Yeah, that actually feels pretty good. So now we're actually kind of seeing reflections in there. And a nice bright highlight from that light source up top. So that feels pretty good. Now we can go ahead and also individually color correct the yellow part of the body, the struts and the inner wings. Once again, let's add another color correct node. And let's find the right shuffle. So with the color correct, we will input, once again, the rocket ship. So the rocket ship can go into multiple nodes. And we will grab the mask and connect it to the shuffle 3, which is the correct alpha channel. As you can see, we'll just look at we'll view the alpha for this. So that's the right one. And we'll start color correcting just the yellow. And just to confirm that we're working properly, we'll just go to the midtones and just crank our gain. Yep, so that's working right. So once again, our main purpose is to try to get some highlights happening. If there's any in here, so let's push the contrast up on the midtones and reduce the saturation, see if we can push any highlights out. Yeah, there's a little bit happening there. It's a little bit much. Just fool around with that. That's actually, we should look at it all over the plate. So I'll select the last node in the flow and type 1. And actually this isn't merged into the flow yet, so we can't see what it's going to look like. So let's drop in a merge node and put it right under here. And of course, when we when we merge this, we have A over B. So whatever is coming into this color correct is completely overwriting whatever's in this color correct. So we actually need to cut this merge out using a mask. We want to use the same mask, so we'll grab the mask from the merge and connect it to the shuffle 3 as well. And now you'll see we have the color correct from the red coming through, and this color correct merge is only merging the area within this mask now. So it's actually feeling a little bit more like it belongs in that scene, that's for sure. And now we need to make a little bit of space for this third shuffle. So let's just pull these up here. You don't want it to become too confusing. It's a little bit messy there right now. Let's add another color correct node. And once again, the rocket goes into the color correct node. The shuffle 4 goes into the mask. And we're going to need to add another merge down here. Just drop that in between to this color correct, and the merge also needs the mask from shuffle 4. Alright, so we haven't actually done anything to the blue in here yet, but when we grab the correct color correct node, and once again we'll go to the midtones and just crank the gain just to see that it's working properly, and yes it is, it's just doing those outer wings. So once again, let's just look in there and we'll turn up the contrast and turn down the saturation a little bit, and that should pop us out some nice highlights on there. There we go. So now the area that's facing toward the light is more brightly illuminated than the top area. So it's feeling a little bit better. If we want to see what it looks like with and without this correction, by the way, we can simply select the node and type D to disable, and you see the D we'll put a cross across the node. So it's easy to kind of go through and test it out and to see how much crisper and brighter it looks with this color correct on. We can look at the yellow color correct and see what it's doing for us. So you can see it really brings out the highlights and reflections. And the same with the red color correct node. I can disable it so you can see the difference. Look at how flat it looks, and once we apply the color correct, look at how dimensional and crisp and bright it looks. So these 3 color correct nodes are doing a lot to add some realism and some depth to the lighting on the rocket ship, and that's feeling an awful lot better. So now just taking a look at our flow, you can see that although we're adding things one at a time, and each one individual thing is quite simple, you can see how the flow grows in complexity and can very easily become a little bit overwhelming and difficult to understand. So it's important to try to keep your flows organized and keep them logical, because there's a good chance that you may have to put this flow away for 2 or 3 weeks, or sometimes even 2 or 3 months, and then come back and open it up. Or even worse, somebody else may have to open it up and work on it. And the first thing that person will have to do is wrap their head around it by trying to trace everything and seeing how you've done everything. So keeping tidy and logical is really important. What I'd like to look at next is this antenna. So we have this great animated mat of the antenna. Let's just take a look at it. Antenna mat. So this antenna mat, if we play through, we can see that it starts blinking on around, well, let's see where it starts blinking on. Its first blink is around frame 125, and then it blinks faster and faster and faster until it becomes continuous, and then it stays continuous for the takeoff. But in our actual comp, we don't have that happening right now. So I want to use that mask to affect the brightness of the rocket ship antenna. So once again, I'm going to do a grade on the rocket ship itself. So I'm going to need to get this mask up there. So let's just push it up a little bit closer. And this will be a mask of the grade of the rocket ship before I merge it back in. So we're going to need another merge back in here. So the first thing is, let's just add a grade node. And I'll be grading the rocket ship using the mask. It says mask right on it. And let's just view this right now. And you can see that I've made an error. What I forgot is that the mask is in the RGB channels, and I haven't shuffled it into the alpha. So this is really good. It's telling me I've done an error. It's saying non-existent channel used for mask. And we can tell if we look at the alpha channel of this, we can see that there's nothing in it. So we do need to do our shuffle here. So let's add a shuffle node. Stick it right in there, and we'll shuffle the red channel into the alpha. And now when we view this, we can see, or rather we'll view the shuffle, and we can see that the correct channel is coming out in the alpha, and there's no more error in here because now we are using the alpha channel for the mask. So when we view this in RGB mode, we can go to well, I think we're on a frame. We'll go up here to a frame where the color correct is on. There we can see it's on right there. And once again, we'll just check that our comp is working. First thing, we'll just turn the gain way up. Yeah, and that's working quite nicely. So let's just turn our gain way up and then play this through and see what happens, because it should be working now and brightening up our antenna according to the animated antenna mat. There it is. It's working quite nicely. I'm pretty happy with how that's working. Now we could change the color here if we want, but that wasn't the intention. We wanted it to be kind of a greenish blue antenna color. Okay, so here's a slightly different approach to adding the animated light, the animated antenna light back in. Rather than merging it back over here this time, we're going to actually pull these color corrects from this grade. And the reason is, you may recall, these three color corrects don't affect the antenna. They only affect the three colors of the body part. So let us disconnect these three color corrects from the original rocket render. Just disconnect all three color corrects. And instead, we'll draw them from this grade. So now when we play this thing, we have our three color corrected colors, plus we have our animated gain on the antenna as well. This is really starting to feel quite a lot better than it was with the initial CG renders. I think the next thing we're going to need to look at is these little red tip lights that aren't showing up very much. We want to draw attention to those. We really want them to stand out because they signify, they kind of feel like there's a startup sequence going on, like the emergency lights are starting to flash, everybody get away, we're getting ready to launch. And that's the feel we want, so we want to draw some attention to that. Let's go back to our flow, find our animated wing light mat. There it is. Let's just double check that that's the right one. Yep, that's definitely the right one. You can see those little tip lights flashing there. And we're once again going to need to color correct the rocket ship render, the original rocket ship render. So we can take the animated antenna mask as a template, and we can just copy what we've done there. It's as simple as this. We'll grab this, we'll stick it over here, we'll drop down a shuffle node, we'll shuffle one of the RGB channels into the alpha, push this up, we'll actually add a grade node right in between here, and we'll hook the mask up to the shuffle. And this will affect only the tips of the wings. And let's connect this to our viewer by typing 1. And let's find a frame. Actually, we'll connect our mat to 1, to viewer 1, and we'll find a frame where at least one of the lights is on. There's one. Okay. So now what we want to do is really find a way to enhance this, hopefully using this grade node. So let's turn the gain way up. It's not doing a lot for us. Let's try lifting it. That helps a bit. We don't really necessarily want to take all of the red out. We don't want to make it too pink. So one thing we can do is we can add a bit of glow around the edge. Okay, here's a really simple way to add a little bit of glow around here. We're going to use the similar trick we used with the smoke, and we're going to create a blurred version and put it behind here. So first let's add a blur and take it from the shuffle. So let's look at that. That's what it looks like, and we just want to increase it until it's a nice glow. And we'll just pick whichever one looks the best to us. Those are all kind of square, so yeah, I think the Gaussian is the best in this instance. And we're going to merge it with itself. So we're going to put A, the original, over B, the blurred one. And this is what we get in our final one. So we have our nice crisp initial one, and behind it we have this kind of blur. Now we'd like to color correct this to red with a grade. So tab GR to get a grade. And we'll make this one our viewable right now. And we'll go to our gain and turn up our saturation. So now we have a nice red glow happening. And then we need to merge this with everything else. So you probably put it right down here. I want to stick it on top of my rocket. And I don't want it to be cut out by any of the other mats. So for now, I'll just see if this works. I'm going to put a merge in down here. M for merge. And behind I want to be the comp, and on top I want to be my nice glow effect that I've created. So let's take a look at that. Our final comp will stick into 1, and we'll see how that's working. So that's there. It's barely visible. We need to fool around with our settings a little bit. Let's have a look at our blur and see what we can do to bring that out. So it's happening there. It's not totally visible against the very warm background. You can just see it glowing a little bit. We want it to be a little bit more prominent than that. So let's go to our grade and see if we can push that up a bit. Multiplying helps. There, we're starting to see a little bit of glow around there. But we can try things like we can try moving the white point or the gamma. Let's try those. Let's see how white point does it. Yeah, so as we reduce our white point, that seems to help a little bit. Let's see how gamma works for us. Turning up gamma tends to give us a nice glow. So that seems to work visually, but we really need to see how that is going to work in animation. So I'll just back off here and I'll cache this out. I'll pause while I cache this out. We'll take a look at how it looks in animation. Okay, so here it is in animation, and that's a really good thing to look at in animation rather than just on a still frame, because here, we learn once again that where something can look fine in a still frame, in animation could have some significant errors. So the problems here, there's two main problems. Let me just pause this here. Let's go back and forth. One is, while one of these, the one that we looked at looked okay, when we look at it in motion, and especially against the black, the glows are really wildly overblown. So we really need to bring those down more subtly. And additionally, we can see that as the smoke covers our lights, we're still seeing the lights on top of the smoke. So we've got it layered incorrectly. We've got it over everything, and it needs to be over the rocket, over the plate, but under the smoke. So first, let's deal with looking at bringing it down so that it's not crazy over the black here. There's a good frame to look at. So we'll go back to our grade, and let's turn the gamma down. because that's the primary tool we use to bring it up in the first place. And I think we could probably desaturate it slightly as well. So we'll go over here and just pull our saturation down slightly. That's helpful. Let's take a quick peek at that. And now let's find a frame where the light is over the smoke. There it is. And let's look at our layering here. So our merge occurs right here at the very end. Here's our smoke. So our smoke is merging in right above it. So I think we just need to reorder these two merges. And that's fairly straightforward. We'll simply run this one into here and run this one into here and view out of the end again. So now the light and the glow are behind the smoke and not visible. So I'll once again recache this and we'll have another evaluation. Alright, so here's our cached render. And those red lights, once again, they're visible, but they're not crazy overblown. And they're properly hiding behind the smoke now as well. So that's feeling a lot better. Okay, now that we have the effects working on our rocket ship, I'd like to take a closer look at our smoke here. There's two main issues with the smoke, and that is that the brightness doesn't feel quite equal to the surrounding environment, and definitely the color is not warm enough. So here's our smoke. We want to take both the layers. You may recall that we added a more blurred layer behind and a less blurred layer in front to keep a little bit of crispness, and then we merged them back together. So what we want to do is color correct those together. So we'll add a color correct after this merge. So select this, tab, cull. Let's do the color correct node. It'll pop in right after automatically. And we'll start looking at the highlights and midtones. So first of all, just to gather where our highlights and midtones are, let's just grab the gain of the highlights and see. So those are our highlights. And the same thing with our midtones. That's our midtones. And let's also just look at our shadows since we're looking. So the really darker areas we have control over as well. And then of course we have master control over everything together. So first thing I want to do before I deal with the brightness is I would like to get it into the correct color space. And I'm looking around trying to find something else that's white in here. There actually isn't a lot of white in here. Let me just look at the... Okay, so here this thing is whitish. It's a little bit kind of a creamy white. So we definitely need to go in that direction. You can see how much warmer this white is than our smoke. So let's start with our midtones, and let's try to do a simple color correct. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to try and pick from the plate. So we'll grab our picker, and we simply need to control click on this white here to try to find something that's in the right tone. You can see by going right deep inside there into the highlights, we right away get something that pulls it a lot closer into the right realm. And then let's do a similar thing for our highlights as well. Once again, click on the picker. We'll go in here and we'll actually find the highlight on this item here. We're going to click right in there, right on the highlight, and see how that looks for us. There we go. So actually finding something that's whitish in the scene and pulling out our midtone and highlight colors looks like it's brought the smoke a lot more into the world of the plate. Let's just disable this color correct with the D key to see the difference between what we had and what we have now. And you can see how much better this feels like it belongs in the world just with that very simple color correct. The next thing I'd like to look at is this shadow density and color. So the shadow for the smoke and the rocket ship, and I want to compare it to this coffee cup shadow over here. So let's find this in our flow here. Okay, here are our three shadows. The ambient shadow, the rocket ship shadow, and the smoke shadow. And they're all coming together right here at this merge. So we want to do a color correct actually after the shuffle and after the invert. We have actually a grade node on it. We're using these as a mask to grade the plate. So we can do it right here in this existing grade node. So let's turn off we just kind of roughed in a color there. And let's grab our color picker and try to pick from the plate. Once again, hold down the control key. There we go. And we can just pick a shadow color directly from the plate. That's a little too red. Let's just back off on this and have a look at it. Yeah, still a little too red. Let's try to find a better spot here. And of course we can pick a color and then we can make adjustments to it afterwards if we can't find the exact color that we want. So that's still not quite there. Once again, a little bit too red. So let's go into our color picker here. And we can see how red this is. We can actually just shift it off either by using our hue, or we can pick individual colors and just shift them off a little bit. So let's turn our red down a little bit and see where we get here. See if we can find just the right color. Let's turn our green up a little bit, get it a little browner. Okay, that's feeling really close to me. And the only thing is, I think that our rocket ship shadow is not soft enough. Now you see that the softness is about similar to the cup, but what we know about light is that the greater distance there is from the object casting the shadow to the object receiving the shadow, the softer the shadow becomes. So if this tip of this rocket ship were as close as this handle is, then the shadow should be the same softness. But because this distance is much greater, this rocket ship shadow should be a bit softer, and it really feels quite wrong to us. So let us find our rocket ship shadow. Here it is, and here's its blur node. Let's just double click that to get that at the top. I'll close the color picker, and let us just increase the blur size a little bit. That feels a little bit better. Alright, with these changes all done, I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to save so I don't lose all that work. And I'll maximize our viewing pane here and do a quick preview. Alright, so here's our current render. And you can see that it's looking a lot better in many aspects. The first thing that I notice is that our shadow density is a little too high, a little too dense, a little too dark overall, now that we see it in motion. And one of the things bothering me is that the yellow has kind of really lost its brightness, its life. So I'd like to bring it a little bit warmer, maybe a little closer towards this banana color. So those are the two things we're going to look at next. First of all, let's take a look at the shadow. So we notice, especially at the beginning, it looks way off of the shadow, and the reason for that is that light over here is creating a specular highlight in that shadow, making it appear brighter. And then towards the end, the specular highlight is way over here, way out left off camera, so it's not showing up inside that shadow. Even so, this still looks a little bit too dark. I could animate the color of that shadow inside there. However, for the purposes of this training video, I think I'm just going to try to find a middle ground that works well for both ends. It's obviously not going to work right there for the beginning. Actually, looks like we even have an slight exposure change right in there. So let's just go back and look at the shadow density and try to find a middle value that's going to work the best. Maybe something in this range. Type the spacebar to get back to the node graph. And let's find, once again, our color correct for our rocket shadow. There it is right here, our grade. So what we did was we picked a color, and then let's make an adjustment to it with the color picker. So I'll zoom in here so I can compare them again, and I'm going to start just by bringing the value up a bit. Try to get the right density. That's the right density, but now the color isn't right. So let's use the picker again. We'll control click inside here. You can see the picker is turned on. Control click, and we'll just try to get something in the ballpark here. Those are all feeling too warm again. I want to get something a little browner. So that's in the ballpark for density, and let's go over to our color here. And once again, we'll turn the red down a little bit, turn the green up a little bit. Oh, too much green. That's a little oversaturated, so let's turn our saturation down a little bit. Okay, that's pretty close. Just eyeballing this color with this color. That's pretty close. So we'll go ahead and work with that for our next full render. And next we want to look at the color of the yellow struts and yellow inner wings and try to bring it into a little bit more of a brighter, warmer yellow color. And if you recall, we can control that through one of these three color corrects, and I believe it was this one. So this would be this color correct here. Let's just confirm that. I'll double click it to bring it up to the top, and we'll grab the gain on our highlights and just confirm. Yep, that's it there. Set that back to 1. Now what I want to do with my midtones is I want to grab the color picker for the gain. And currently we just have white here, so let's add a little bit of saturation. That's already feeling, that's obviously way too much. But just adding a little bit is already feeling a little bit better, and we want to shift it a little bit warmer as well. And it's pretty easy to do. We can add red, or we can remove some green and blue, or mainly remove blue. Now removing blue does the job. Let's see. I think we might want to do a little bit of both. Add a little bit of red, and remove a little bit of blue. That's too much. And that looks about right. Let's just disable that color correct node and see what the difference is. So yeah, big difference. And of course, we can also color pick it as well by control clicking. And we said we liked some of the color inside of here, so we can see if there's something in here that works for us. But you know, this actually isn't working as well as the color correct that we did by ourselves. So type Control Z to undo that, and I think we'll go with that color. It's feeling a little bit better. Alright, so with those two changes done, I'm going to do another preview. Alright, so here's our preview, and we're getting pretty close to done here. Last thing I think I want to deal with is I just feel like there should be a little bit brighter highlights on that yellow, just like there is happening on that red. So let's take a look there. I'll just pause this preview. And right around here, let's take a close look in there. Feels like, yeah, there are some highlights happening there, and I think we need to enhance them a little bit. That is, again, our, which color correct that is? I believe that's this one right here, the one we just dealt with to make the warmer yellow. And we need to look at our highlights. So let's just crank the gain up on our highlights and see if we got them. We have control over them. There they are. And the idea here is by pushing these highlights, what we want to do is create areas of overexposure. Because the real light in the scene, of course, is high range light. It's far brighter than we can display in this low range display medium that we have, this computer monitor. And adding areas of overexposure gives a sense of realistic lighting to CG. One of the biggest problems in CG is always rendering within a low range. In other words, 0 to 255 RGB. You want to render above that, and that's why we will render in OpenEXR file format, because that'll allow us to illuminate far beyond the normal low range display, and then push up our highlights and make it feel better. In this case, I don't think we have that enough illumination in there. So we can, there's lots of different ways. We can try turning the gamma up on those. That actually broadens the whole thing. We can, let's turn up our gain. That helps. And then let's try reducing the contrast. I might widen them a little bit. So now we're getting a nice broad area of overexposure. Let's just back off and see how that looks from a distance. That's not too bad. Let's increase our saturation a little bit to put some of the color back in. Let's see here. So there's our highlight. Yeah, so around there should be good. Okay. So we'll render that out for one more pass and take a look at it and see if there's any last things that we can really put our fingers on that are really quite bothersome. Now, of course, the last thing you're going to need to know for your comp is how to render out your final image sequence. That's pretty straight ahead. We need to attach our write node. So right after the last node in our flow, we need to put a write node after that. And we can do it either by going over and selecting it from here, or we can simply type W, and I'll drop it in right after the selected node. There it is. Now, it's very straightforward. All we need to do is say where we want our file to save. I have a directory called renders, but of course you can put it anywhere you'd like to. I put it in renders nuke directory, and I'm going to call it rocketship version 01. Actually, I should probably call it rocketship comp underscore version 01. And then I'm going to put a dot, and I have to explicitly tell it to render a sequence by putting %04, that's the padding number D. So frame number 1 will come out as 0001. I could actually, it's only 220 something frames long, so I could actually put 03D. I don't need it to be 4, padded to 4. And then I put another dot, and then I put the file name extension. In this case, I'm just going to render target files. If this is a real comp, I would probably render DPX files, which are log space files for film, or I might render EXR files. It depends on who it's going to next, but for the purpose of this tutorial, we're just going to render target files. Hit the save button. Do you see the file type has automatically set itself to Targa? but if you can change it to a different file type, of course, there's lots of different file types in here to choose from. If you do change the file type, don't forget to change the name or otherwise you won't be able to load them properly. Now, basically, okay, because it's a target file, we have an option to select compressed or non-compressed. The compression is lossless. But once you're all set up, you simply hit the render button. It'll make it inquire as to whether or not it has the right frame range and everything, what you want it to do if it hits an error and so forth, and simply hit the OK button and you'll start seeing it render. Here it's telling us it's going to take a couple of minutes to finish rendering, so I'll just pause while that happens. Alright, now that the render is complete, we can just add another read node and take a look at it. And there it is. Renders frames 1 to 225. Simply type 1, put it in the viewer, and there we have it. There's our completed comp rendered out. Okay, so here's our comp all put together. Let's just take a look at it. Everything seems to be working. Things seem to be roughly in the right color space. Shadows, smoke, the ship. Now, if this were a real comp, I would obviously spend many hours very carefully matching up all the colors and hues and shadows and shaded sides. This comp could easily take hours or even days to properly complete. However, that's not the purpose of this training video. The purpose of this section is to familiarize yourself with Nuke and see how we would put these render layers together, and to get you started so that you can go forth and start compositing. One of the things that's important to note is that with any good software, there's at least 2 or 3 ways of doing any given operation. So while we've looked at certain specific methods for doing certain things, it's very important to understand that there's always lots of other ways of doing it, and that you really should be looking at all kinds of different Nuke training and speaking to a whole bunch of different Nuke artists to find out all the different methods of accomplishing the various tasks. One of the ways that you can do this on your own, if you don't have immediate access to other experienced Nuke artists, is you can really just have a look through all the various lists of nodes, try them out, see what they do. There's so many tools in here that we've only touched on a very few of them. There's so many great tools in here. This is really a very amazing and powerful piece of software. So, try to follow along with this tutorial. The Nuke flow, the completed Nuke flow, is part of the content, as is all of the renders and the plate, so you can actually try this all out yourself and follow along if you wish, or you can try it out in completely different ways. It would be great to see your final comps if you decide you want to make the rocket purple, pink, and orange, or whatever. I'd love to see the kind of results that you come up with. So thanks for your time and attention. I hope this training video has been useful. And if you have any feedback, comments, or suggestions, please don't hesitate to drop us a line at contact@cgmasters.com.